I'm just gonna keep doing this. I just drank a lot of coffee, can you tell? Ah, it's Tony, Today in Nerd History.
Today in Nerd History!
So, using algorithmic mapping, we can extrapolate the precise dimension and ratios to determine that Ariel is not an American B cup, but is in fact a seashell.
Oh, Professor Cleavage.
Ah, Tony.
What have I told you? There are no pervy lectures in the common area about Disney girls. Plus, we already did a video about that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just trying to educate the children.
Well, let's educate them about something else.
Here's 5 Disney movies that were almost completely different. Number 1, Zootopia.
Like all the movies that are gonna be on this list, Zootopia was once a very different beast. The main difference between the version that we saw and the original version is that Judy Hopps, ZPD's first bunny cop, was not always going to be the main character.
At first, it was everyone's favorite slick fox, Nick Wilde. The cynicism that's central to Nick's character was also reflected in the dark vision of the original city. Zootopia was originally about predators being forced to wear shock collars so they could peacefully coexist with prey. In the early drafts of the script, even big softies like Clawhauser were forced to wear tame collars that would emit an electrical shock if they became too emotional.
To make matters worse, the producers of the film said that the shock collars weren't actually necessary for the safety of the prey, but were rather just a fascist tactic to make them feel better.
Check out the scene where Nick has to have his collar taken off for a brief moment at the doctor's office, and it's treated with the severity of a bomb diffusion. This version of the movie showed predators harshly perceived as explosive, violent, rather than as living things. As the scene goes on, Nick enjoys a brief respite from his colored existence and entertains a daydream of riding an exciting roller coaster before his happiness is cut short and he's slammed back into an existence of emotional captivity.
If this all sounds too heavy for a Disney movie, well, Disney agreed.
Mandatory visual markers denoting a class with fewer rights was a bit too Hitlery to make into the final movie. But by the time they pulled the plug, the film was storyboarded and a number of the scenes pre-visualized, including this heartbreaking scene in which a young polar bear named Morris gets his collar at a taming party, which is kind of like a sad state-sanctioned bar mitzvah that all 5-year-old predators must go through. But it's a signifier of maturity. Morris is a big bear now, so Morris gets a little too excited, and then this happens.
That look says it all. With his first shock, Morris would never be the same. Morris would have to eventually learn what it really means to be a big bear, no longer being free. It's not really surprising that all this shock collar business had to go, but I'm not really sad about it either. I'm not sure that I could bear to see this scene again. Because, you know, it's a small child bear that is being tortured in this Disney movie.
Number 2, The Lion King.
The Lion King is often seen as the crown jewel of the 90s Disney Renaissance, and it holds up to this day. But would it still have been a classic if the original version had been produced? My vote is a resounding no, probably because all of the incest in it wouldn't have aged very well. And was gross even then. It was weird. Let's talk about it.
Early drafts of The Lion King followed the same basic plot structure.
Cough, cough, Hamlet. I'm doing that thing where we pretend that it's surprising that The Lion King is Hamlet.
But beyond that, things get weird fast. There are small differences, like a German pachyderm named Herr Rhino and an anteater who had an unhealthy crush on Simba. But the big changes are with Scar, who is now even more violent and ruthless. Instead of sly and slinky, he was a huge bruiser. And following suit, instead of just throwing Mufasa to be killed in a wildebeest stampede, original Scar snaps Mufasa's neck in his jaws in front of everybody.
An utterly brutal death, this easily would have been the darkest kill that Disney had ever committed to film.
Except for maybe like when Mulan straight up buried 1,000 dudes alive in an avalanche.
But let's not get too hung up on Scar because I promised you incest and you are gonna get it.
It always kind of felt to me like Simba and Nala seemed like they were cousins, but in the original version of the script, they were actual cousins. Like straight up. In the script, they referred to each other by cousin instead of their names.
Which is only a thing that you do if you're really excited by the prospect of having sex with your cousin.
Worse yet, it's possible that they're actually siblings. Dialogue implies that Mufasa is the father of both of them. Real prides of lions have 1, maybe 2 males. I mean, think about it. Do you remember any other adult male lions in The Lion King other than Mufasa and Scar? Yeah.
A deleted song, The Madness of King Scar, which actually appeared later, slightly different in the Broadway musical version of The Lion King, revealed that Scar wanted Nala to be the mother of his children. He just, like, straight up wanted to... kids.
Nala refuses because, wow, gross, but in both versions, Scar says he's not gonna take no for an answer.
And we know that Disney movies are supposed to be for all ages, so I'm pretty sure that implied rape doesn't belong anywhere in this movie.
The darker version of Scar deserved a darker demise, and boy howdy did he get one! In the original ending, it's Simba who's tossed off Pride Rock into the fiery abyss below, not Scar. However, Simba lives, and the fire climbs Pride Rock, cornering Scar, who's left to howl maddening laughter as he is immolated alive.
You'd think that Disney would have learned a lion-sized lesson after making the first movie. And you would be wrong, you'd be wrong, you'd be wrong and stupid.
In the straight-to-video sequel, the villainous Zira falls to her death after Simba and Nala's daughter Kiara fails to save her. But in the original version, Zira willingly commits suicide, throwing herself off the edge rather than accept help from Nala.
Then again, if you lived in a world where incest was the only means of procreation, you might want to jump off a cliff too.
Number 3, Aladdin.
Simply by viewership, a ton of Disney movies had become like the de facto accepted interpretation of stories that existed long before the movie. Prior to 1992, most Westerners probably didn't even know that Aladdin was a thing.
The word genie probably conjures up a picture of a bright blue cocaine-addled Robin Williams character instead of, well, this. These are official character concepts that could be from as early as 1988, where the original treatment of the movie called for 2 genies, the genie of the lamp and the less powerful genie of the ring, just as there were in the original 18th century story.
In fact, there were a lot of changes to the original story. Though technically a Middle Eastern folktale, the Aladdin of yore was actually a young Chinese man in an ambiguous setting.
Disney figured it was a safer bet throwing the whole thing in a fictional Arabian city and calling it good. But they did have trouble settling on a design for the titular character. Notice anything these sketches have in common? Yep, they look a lot more like a Middle Eastern teen, opposed to this conspicuously whiter fella who's actually modeled after Tom Cruise. That's real, look it up. And it's not like we're just noticing how weird this is 24 years later.
At the time of the movie's release, critic legend Roger Ebert said,
"One distraction during the film was its odd use of ethnic stereotypes. Most of the Arab characters have exaggerated facial characteristics. Hooked noses, glowering brows, thick lips, but Aladdin and the princess look like white American teenagers. Wouldn't it be reasonable that if all the characters in this movie come from the same genetic stock, they should resemble one another?"
And he's right. I mean, you'd think that Aladdin would take after his mom, which reminds me, in earlier drafts, Aladdin had a mom.
She was to be the heart of the film, with Aladdin's main goal to make her proud. This even prompted a song, Proud of Your Boy, which obviously didn't make the final cut.
In the storyboards, we see that Aladdin's unnamed mother pleaded with him to sell her engagement ring.
Though he initially complies with her request, in the cut song we see him tuck her in and return the ring to her finger, determined to get his shit together and support his family. It's an entirely unique scene that lends an entirely different dimension to the movie, and makes Aladdin's action seem a lot less self-serving than in the final movie.
And perhaps to counterbalance that, Aladdin's original wishes were far more disturbing.
As troublesome as it might have been to whip together a bunch of fake people for Prince Ali to parade around with in Agrabah, in earlier versions, Aladdin asked to have an entire kingdom full of subservient people, summoned out of nothingness. The implications are upsetting enough, and with these grander heights, Aladdin also has further to fall. Instead of Jafar revealing Aladdin's identity in a brief reprise of Prince Ali, Evil Vizier dedicates an entire song to humiliating the boy, called, Humiliate the Boy. He strips him, degrades him, and what the hell, makes him vomit a flock of live birds. The song also addresses the problem of Prince Ali's loyal subjects, revealing that they were comprised entirely of bugs and rats. And so by Jafar's command, Agrabah is suddenly plagued with insects and rodents, the latter of which Genie even specifies were diseased.
And that's a super gross note to leave Aladdin on, and we already did the incest thing earlier, so let's do a fun one.
In an earlier video, I had explained how the film's co-director had endorsed a theory that the merchant at the beginning of the film was secretly the genie in disguise, as they're both voiced by Robin Williams and they're the only characters with 4 fingers instead of 5.
But what I didn't show you before was a piece of a work print which shows how the shopkeeper is revealed to be the genie.
And it's a cool bookend. I'm not sure why they ditched it.
I guess they were banking on a sequel that would be like a space adventure in which Aladdin and Jasmine have an adventure in Moon Genie's head. I don't get it. I don't get what this is supposed to be. Let me know in the comments below. Why is he the moon?
Number 4, Toy Story.
Toy Story has staying power for a lot of reasons. I mean, there's the animation and there's the cool premise, but it's the endearing characters that really make it work.
It's hard not to love an overconfident cowboy and his meathead space ranger buddy. But like all these other movies, Toy Story went through a lot of iterations in pre-production before landing on the story we all know and love.
Woody changed the most, starting out as a, are you ready for this? A ventriloquist dummy. I know, I can hear you sighing through the screen, but yes, I'm glad that somebody at Pixar realized that this should be illegal. It's bad.
Now, Woody's always been kind of a dick, but he's got heart. It's just a big heart dick, or dick heart. Big dick, he's a dick. But in early versions, Woody had a knotted black void of despair of contempt in his chest. In this draft, Slinky Dog isn't Woody's best friend. He's Woody's most pathetic and loyal lackey.
Pixar president Edwin Catmull explained in his book, Creativity, Inc., that Disney CEO Jeffrey Katzenberg was on a relentless quest to make Woody into a dick for some reason.
The character of Woody, originally imagined as affable and easygoing, became darker and meaner and wholly unappealing. Woody was jealous. He bossed around other toys and called them demeaning names. He had, in short, become a jerk. Buzz also went through something of an evolution during production. Whereas the final Buzz is adorably naive, early Buzz was just an unbelievable idiot. Realizing that his enemy was in fact a galaxy-class moron, Woody attempted to get rid of Buzz by sending him to face Andy's infant sister.
It's a silly scene, but if you really look at it, it shows that this version of Woody is capable of premeditated sabotage.
He's tried to get rid of Buzz once, so it's not really a surprise that he would try again with the behind-the-dresser scheme.
What makes the final version of the movie work is that Woody is pushed to his breaking point by the time that Andy has to pick one toy to take to Pizza Planet, so Woody has to make some questionable decisions on the fly.
But in the early version, Woody willingly tosses his nemesis to his doom with his own hands. Part of the reason Woody is so relatable in Toy Story is because we understand how hard and frustrating it can be to do the right thing. When the other toys gang up on Woody, we know he's innocent, but jerk Woody gets no empathy.
He kind of deserves to be destroyed. Somewhere out there, a negaverse probably exists where all these Disney movies were made with their original dark endings intact. And Toy Story 3 probably did end up with everyone holding hands and just walking right into that incinerator.
Number 5, Lilo and Stitch.
Lilo and Stitch is from a weird, nebulous era of Disney movies, and its strangeness is often kind of ignored.
In most of the movies we've talked about so far, a lot of the kinks were worked out in early production before much significant work was done. But maybe because Disney was so transfixed with the looming domination of 3D animated movies, they ignored their late-in-the-game 2D feature and let it get really weird before anyone noticed what was up. One huge, drastic late-hour tweak was toning down the violence in a big action sequence where the alien Jumba pulls a home invasion on Lilo's house. Test audiences thought the scene was a little too Straw Dogs, and it had to be significantly reanimated. Originally, Jumba was going to destroy the roof while trying to shoot Stitch with his laser gun. But after the changes, those lasers became thrown dishes. You can tell they reused a lot of the same animation and only changed some of the particulars. Also, Jumba lost a lot of weight during reshoots, a hazard that's incurred by hastily farming out scene corrections to an animation house that's not so concerned with keeping characters on model. Other shots were chopped out of the movie like a chainsaw chopping up a 6-year-old. Like this scene where a chainsaw tries to chop up a 6-year-old.
While some of these changes make sense, others maybe went a little too far.
Jumba's original Swiss Army knife of doom was goofy from the start, and it's supposed to be. Its silliness gave the movie character. In the theatrical version of the movie, Lilo's house blows up because a carrot causes Jumba's gun to backfire. The house still blew up in the original version, but it was because a giddy switch cuts the gas main.
The UK even got a couple unique edits on these innocuous things, which is completely on brand for the people who thought that Ninja Turtles was too violent of a title.
Like here. Afraid of having children imitate the movie and climb into a dryer, British audiences got a laundry room that featured a conspicuously placed pizza box.
One scene that got cut early on is actually one of the most insightful, in which we see the kind of latent racism that Lilo has to put up with on a daily basis.
Hey, speak English? Which way to the beach?
Look at this entitled dickhead who sees somebody who isn't white and immediately assumes that English isn't their first language. It's the same thing that Ferris Bueller does.
You speak English?
And I think that we've all, as a society, collectively agreed that he's just like an enormous asshole. Am I wrong?
Keeping this in mind, you can't help but be on Lilo's side when she fakes a tsunami warning to clear the beach of annoying tourists. For Lilo, Hawaii is home. But for disrespectful tourists, the islands are a disposable novelty that don't exist the second they got on a plane ride home.
Though this may have been kind of questionable, one final significant change was pretty necessary.
In the theatrical version of the movie, Lilo is kidnapped by Captain Gantu, and the rest of the gang still gives chase. But in the original cut, Stitch does this by hijacking a 747. In full production by 2001, Lilo and Stitch existed both in the time before and after the September 11th attacks. And when that day came, everyone at Disney realized that there wasn't a chance in hell that they could show a plane being hijacked in their cartoon, much less by one of their protagonists. And so, the 747 became Jumba's huge spaceship. But that wasn't the only thing they had to change. See, the script initially called for the 747 to fly through Honolulu and crash into buildings, terrorizing the local populace.
And yes, they animated all of it.
The finale was heavily revamped, and the setting of the climactic chase sequence shifted from the city to the mountains,
thus saving millions of parents everywhere from having to whisper, "Oh God," under their breath while trying to play it cool in front of their kids. Thankfully, most of these missing Disney materials can be found online if you search hard enough. So if you really wanted to, you could stitch together a dark mirror universe where Woody is a jerk, and Stitch is an arsonist, and you probably could leave out the incest.